here. So.
So as you said, it will be maybe about 45 minutes I can speak.
Something like that, yeah. Jens is on his way.
Jens Annik.
Yeah.
Has he managed to finish his?
I don't know. I haven't. It's the application deadline.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Research
I know.
Council is
Just
today.
before June, yeah.
Yeah, it's today actually.
It's today.
It's
Yeah,
today at
okay.
1 o'clock, yeah.
They
So
have,
lots of people know writing.
Well, people have been working all night.
Yeah.
We've preponed it a little. I'm from the Research Council.
Oh, I see.
It's because we're moving to new locations in the end of June. So normally this deadline is a week or two later.
I
Yes,
thought actually it was in June.
Yeah, normally it is
Okay.
in June. But since we changed location, I assume that's why they've preponed it a little bit.
Okay.
Because all the technicalities to be sure that everything works before we start the moving process. I assume that's why, because it's a bit strange to move it.
We were a bit frustrated because we had planned this in the workshop and seminar, and at that time we didn't know that the application deadline had moved, so it was earlier. So it came at the same time. So
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
kind of panicking here now the last week or so, working on the 17th of May and during the nights and everything.
So the Research Council is relocating
We will relocate to Lysaker.
to Lysaker. Okay.
Yes, to what is Gjensidige Nord, or the Gjensidige building there.
Okay.
Now they moved to Bjørvika, and
Yes.
we will move in there now.
Why are you moving?
Because I think that the main reason is that they needed to renovate the building where we are now and reorganize the building, and instead of moving out and back in again, that would cost too much money. We're moving to new locations, and to save money, we will work in open space. What do you say? Åpent landskap, instead of divided offices, separate offices. Yes, there will be a new situation for us. Not everyone is looking forward to it.
I can understand that.
Yeah, but there will be a very new, very nice meeting venues there, and so it will be fine. But
It was okay, the house you have now.
yeah. I'm perfectly happy with it. It's a matter of space and organization for the renovation.
But you look almost like yesterday. The joy is not there.
Well,
Too tired maybe.
Du er ditt navn?
Åsmarit Kristiansen.
Ja, nettopp.
Ja.
Yes.
Jeg har vært i Nordglobal tidligere, men jeg er koordinator for Globak-programmet nå.
Arne Melker.
Yeah. My previous researchers. I call you mine.
what's the process for Nordglobal now? When do you think there's going to be a new?
I'm not involved in that process since I don't work for that program anymore. So I'm only working for the Global Health and Vaccination Program now.
Oh,
So I really don't know, but I know they're working on the new program structure, and they have a working group. And,
yes, I know there's a group of researchers writing a kind of a program note.
A program note, exactly. That's what it is. It's not a program plan, exactly. So, but I really, I can't say much more about it. I know they're wrapping it up these days, I think. So I don't know if it will be out before summer or how they will proceed with it.
And
if
then
they will have
after
a
that,
hearing
there's going to be the process with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and with NORAD or.
I'm not sure, to be honest. Sorry.
I
So
think
I
they're
don't want to
discussing
say anything because I'm not involved in it myself.
NUPI is in some committee with they're discussing drafts. So so they're doing it now, I think. final stage.
Yeah, I think they have their final meeting this week, actually, or last week. So, but exactly how they will proceed, I don't know.
I hope they will have an economist in the program board in the future.
They do now.
Yes, there is
2.
Okay, right. Excellent.
So.
Very good.
Well, I don't know, maybe we should just start. Welcome. My name is Stein Sundsdal Eriksen. I am the head of the research department called Emerging Powers and Global Development here at NUPI. I am also involved with a joint research project funded by the Research Council on industrial policy and industrial developments in India. As a part of that project, we are these days having a project meeting here at NUPI with our Indian partners. Sudip Chaudhuri from the Indian Institute of Management in Calcutta, and Surajit Mazumdar from the Nehru University in Delhi. And today, Professor Chaudhuri will speak about innovation and the patent protection in an Indian context, with a special focus on the pharmaceutical industry in India. Professor Chaudhuri is one of the leading experts on the pharmaceutical industry in India, and has worked especially on the implications of the TRIPS agreement for the pharmaceutical industry in India. So today he's going to talk about this based on his long time research on the topic. And this is also a topic that is part of our joint project. So, Professor Chaudhuri, please.
Thank you so much. Good morning, all of you. I'm really delighted to be here. And thank you, NUPI and Stein in particular, for making this possible. Now, this is a very controversial topic, but just for the sake of discussions and interactions, I will make my points very directly and clearly. And I do hope that we'll have a very good discussion after that. See, when a product patent is granted for a new drug, it means that nobody else can manufacture or sell it. So it's a monopoly. And the important thing is, monopoly normally is bad, but why is it given? And the reason is that you want to stimulate R&D for innovation, because if product patent is not there, you are spending money, and then when you develop, anybody else can produce, so you are not getting the benefit. So basically, to stimulate R&D, we provide product patent protection. But the very fact that we are doing it through a monopoly means that prices are high. Okay, so we have two effects: one positive, that perhaps innovation will go up, and another negative, that prices will be high. And this is a controversial thing. In a developed country context, there are a lot of discussions going on now whether one can have an incentive structure where you have the incentive, but you do not have the negative of high price. And hopefully something will develop along that line. But till then, it is accepted in developed world that patents have played a role. Okay. But if you consider the developing countries, the traditional view is that you need not give product patents. And the reason is very simple, this plus and minus. See, what is the argument for product patent? That you can do R&D and then can benefit. But in the first place, if you do not have the infrastructure to do R&D, especially new drugs, okay, then you are not benefiting from that. But if you provide product patention, then you have to pay a high price. So you have no positive but negative. And therefore the idea is that no, you should not give product patents. What happened? This TRIPS changed the situation. Before this trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights of World Trade Organization, which, and as you know, WTO came into effect in 1995. the countries were free to have their own patent regime. But in 1995, TRIPS changed it, and now it is mandatory for all member countries of WTO to have product patents. So therefore, India also right now have product patents. India is an interesting case study because India did not have product patents till 1972. Had product patents till 1972. Then India abolished it from 1972 until WTO 1995-2005, depending on, actually India implemented it in 2005. You had no product patent protection, and again now you have product patent. Therefore, comparing these three periods, one can get some good idea about what really has been the impact of product patent protection in a developing country. Now, it is important that now I think there is documentary evidence that basically TRIPS came into effect not because of the demand from developing countries, but because developed countries like US, European Union, Japan, they wanted it. And it is very surprising that not much of empirical work was done to really contest the traditional view, because traditional wisdom was that developing countries need not have product patent protection. But that was not done. In fact, if you go by the Indian experience, that will actually contest this view that product patents would be good. And that is what I want to discuss now. Consider the situation before 1972, when you had product patent like today in India. And at that time, naturally, since the multinationals were really innovating new drugs, and since they had product patents, only they can manufacture unless they give license. What is very important to understand is those days, 50s, 60s, India became independent in 1947. India wanted to develop the industry. We had product patents, but multinationals those days were not keen to manufacture because the market was too small. There are many other reasons. We can go into details later. And what is worse, they also did not allow the Indians when in few occasions they were ready to manufacture. Okay, so neither they were interested in manufacturing, nor did they allow the Indian companies to do so. In fact, there were a lot of litigation those days preventing Indians. And the result was that, we had an underdeveloped industry, we had to import, and it was a market dominated by multinationals. And in fact, because of monopoly, the prices were very high. In 1960s, there was a study done by one Senate committee of USA, and they actually identify India as among the highest priced nations in the world. So that was the situation in late 1960s. Then India decided, given the freedom that you had those days, to abolish it. And let's just see what happened after that. Normally when we say incentives, we make a distinction between pull and push. Pull incentives being where you increase the market or increase the certainty of a market, and push from the cost side where you try to economize on the cost. Okay. Now, India before 1972 actually did not have the space because multinationals were not allowing. And in fact, the abolition of product patents gave the Indian companies the space. Now there were no legal barrier. So Indian firms, if they can develop a technology for manufacturing, they can enter. That is one. But what is very important, very often we overestimate the importance of product patent or Patents Act, Patents Act in India. Because if you see the situation before TRIPS, about 50 countries in the world, developing country, did not have product patent, but they did not develop the way India did. And therefore, obviously, there are some other factors. And the other factor was the industrial policy, which, as Stein mentioned, is also the topic of our joint research project. Basically, let me go a little bit of history because it is so interesting. India, the 1950s, the view was that, look, multinationals are so advanced. They are, of course, even today advanced. And it is such a sophisticated industry. We do not have technology. We are just starting. So why not develop the industry with the help of multinationals? And therefore, in 1950s, India, in fact, invited the multinationals, Glaxo, Pfizer, and others, please come and invest and help the country to develop. But multinationals did not. And what is very interesting is what India did. India, as you know, those who are following India, in many areas we are very unsuccessful. But there are few areas where we have succeeded, and pharma is one. And what is interesting is what India did. India actually went to the Soviet Union. Now we know that Soviet Union pharma industry was actually not that advanced. Later, in fact, India became better than USSR. Right now, they are better than Russia. But those days, because of political reasons, they offered help. And what came up was a huge plant, which the private sector could not do. in a Indian city called Hyderabad. And the name of the company was Indian Drugs and Pharmaceutical Limited, IDPL. Now, when that plant was set up, the Soviet Union scientists and technologists who came, they did not have the technology was not perfect. So actually, they could not implement it the way they wanted. And it was actually with the help of Indian people that the plant was set up. And as you know, in economics, there's a theory called learning by doing. In the process of implementing that farm, the technology developed. In fact, if you take a large number of Indian farms, the promoters who set up the farms, they actually work in that plant or in the plant set up by those who work there. And therefore, you had this technology. Because you see, if you want to set up a new industry, you have never done that first, the question is from where will technology come? Technology usually can come from foreign multinationals. In this case, did not happen. Private sector typically would be too small. They cannot take the risk. And therefore, government is important. And here is one role which government played. Another was government also set up, many R&D labs in India under the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. That also helped. So what I'm trying to tell you is this, that we had an industrial policy, and in fact abolition of product patents can be considered to be one of the parts of that industrial policy. But what happened? Because of this, by 1970s we were ready. There were Indian entrepreneurs, there were technology, there were in fact what I did not mention here, banks willing to help you, and therefore the industry started developing. And the earlier barrier, legal barrier, that you cannot enter was no longer there. And in a very few, only over a decade or so, India, did develop. So it was remarkable growth. We initially became self-sufficient. They started exporting. It was dominated by India. Competition, low price, and India became what? India became a source of supplies to many countries. Yes, please.
Little question, sir, please, if you please. Just about fact. This plant, Soviet-built plant, IDPM,
Yeah,
as you mentioned.
IDPL, yeah.
Are you telling us that it was able to attract some of the best of Indian engineers in pharmaceuticals, chemistry, etc.? Did they have access to very highly qualified personnel from India?
Yeah, you see, at that time, what that IDPL attracted was young technologists. So what India did, India set up a large number of good engineering and scientific universities and colleges. So when it was set up, people got an opportunity to enter there. So those who entered there were actually at that time not well known, but they were well trained. Like, there's a very famous firm in India called Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Dr. Anji Reddy was one of those young people who did PhD in pharmaceutical technology and who got employed there.
So where did the teachers of these colleges come from? Did they come from abroad, or did you have the teachers?
It was Indian. But the important point is, those technology institutes as such did not teach pharmaceutical technology. There were chemical institutes, okay, there were other engineerings. And therefore what we lacked was the typical, specific pharmaceutical technology. And that actually came from this experiment. So Dr. Anji Reddy actually, his PhD may have been on some theoretical subject, but then he got the opportunity to work there. And then with the help of Soviet Union people, they implemented and got the technology. That is the point I'm making.
The question was just that, were they, in your experience, in your historical knowledge, were they able to attract kind of the best available chemical engineers in India, or some of the best at least?
See, that is a difficult question. When you say best, how do I find out? It's a counterfactual. But what, with the benefit of hindsight, I can say, that some of the people who got attracted, it is possible, for the sake of argument, there were even smarter people around. But what I can tell you is this, that they attracted people who later proved their worth. Like most of these firms, who are promoters, like I can name you about 20 Indian companies, Aurobindo, Hetero, who are doing really well. All of them actually, the initial training came from that IDPL plant. And therefore I would say that actually, you attracted not necessarily the best talent, but enough talent for you to develop later. Okay. Another point I must tell you is regarding litigation. In patent law, it is so important. See, when India was trying to discuss whether the product patent should be abolished, and very interesting, India wanted to abolish product patents immediately after India's independence, 47. But ultimately, India could do only 1972. So it was a very, very tough process. And obviously, one reason was the lobbying by the Western countries and the multinationals, because they did not want India to abolish product patents. And very interestingly, one of the things which was suggested was, why totally abolish product patents? Why not abolish product patents for only minor innovations? Because if it is really significant innovation, multinationals should get credit, and therefore you should have product patent. So that was a concrete suggestion. What is very interesting, India consciously avoided that. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, rightly so. Because if it was like this, that for some you will have product patents, for some you will not have product patents, then the question is who decides? Patent office may decide. But then typically what will happen? Multinationals can go to court, huge litigation, they have more money, so they can actually, ultimately frustrate. In fact, they can use litigation as a source of harassment of Indian firms. But what India did, very simple. Section 5 of the Indian Patents Act earlier was very simple. No product patents for food and medicines, period. And therefore there was no litigation whatsoever. Okay, why litigation is important, I will come back again later. So this is a graph to tell you, how India progressed. If you consider 1970, this blue is a multinational share. They had 2/3 of the market. India had 1/3. And by the time we had TIPS, it was just the other way around. India had 2/3, multinationals 1/3. So the multinationals just went down, and the India just went up.
Are these market shares in pharmaceuticals?
Yes, formulations.
In India.
In India, yeah. So everything that I'm saying, the data in particular would be India, though the arguments would be more general. Okay. Yeah. So now, as I told you, yeah. Any question?
No, India is huge. India is like a continent.
Yeah.
So what you are saying is it's a huge internal market.
Yes.
And whether it reflects on the whole world or not, we will, when speaking about India, always speak about a significant proportion of the whole population of the world.
Yes.
So it's important anyway. Whether it reflects the whole world or not,
right.
may be hard to say.
That is true. Yeah, yes, please.
But this narrative, before we proceed, well, I mean, in general, of course, it's not no surprise that it was good for India to allow to have no patents, so that they would take over. But my question is, I mean, I guess to distinguish between different types of technologies, kind of major breakthroughs, the composition of drugs and the kind of modification of drugs, and thirdly, you also need a technology for the mechanical side. I mean, all industries have their kind of knowledge base, etc., and even marketing is a fourth component. So did India develop its technologies or skills in all these areas? Fundamental research, modifying existing drugs for, the know-how to produce and the marketing capacity in all these areas. Yeah.
Thank you for asking the question. See, the way and it boils down to basically what is innovation. The way I understand innovation, when a country does anything for the first time, that is innovation. And that is an idea that unless you do the cutting edge technology, say what Norway or USA is doing, it's not innovation. Even in India there is a view. The way I see it is, what was the situation in 1950s? 50s it was that you are unable to manufacture medicines which are so vital. So therefore, idea was not that you will actually innovate to develop a new medicine. That comes later. Idea was whatever you required, already medicines existing in the market, whether you are able to manufacture that. So therefore, stress on India was what? To do that. Stress was not to develop new drug R&D, which became an emphasis much later. And there, again, thank you for asking the question. What India, as I said, in many other areas, India did not have the clarity. But here India had the clarity. And what was the clarity? That you see, it is an industrial policy thing. The idea was that multinationals are frustrating the efforts of India to develop. So therefore, what you have to do, you will have to take care of this negative implication and make room for Indian firms to develop. Okay, and how do you do it? First, as I said, public investments in R&D, public investment in manufacturing, developing technology, okay, and also, give the opportunity. Let me tell you another thing which I did not mention. I mentioned about the difference between more important and less important. Another is what India did is, patents can be of two types broadly. One is product, another is process. India allowed process technology, by the way. We abolished product patents, but we did not abolish process patent. So even after 1972, there can be process patent. But very important, which is not appreciated in the literature so much, in USA, when you have the process patent, any firm can patent any number of processes, 30, 40, 50. In India, again consciously, you could actually patent only one process. Actually, I met the person who drafted the act, by the way, and I was asking him, why do you do that? He said, very simple. If you do not do that, then actually the implication of abolition will not be there. Then what will multinationals do? Whenever they have innovated a new drug, they cannot patent the product because it is not possible in India, but then what will do? They will actually, patent all the possible processes, and therefore you will not be able to enter. And that is exactly what happened, has happened in so many cases. Let me give you the example of a very famous drug called Cefaclor, antibiotic, by Eli Lilly. Eli Lilly had 32 processes to prevent, and therefore even when the product patent expired, Indian firms could not. And it was only when Ranbaxy Indian firm developed the 33rd process that they could enter. Okay, so therefore what I find really surprising, I'm saying surprising coming from India, because I do not see that clarity in other areas. But in pharma, that clarity was there for whatever reasons. And I think it's a good topic for our research. Why that happened in pharma, why not in other areas? But coming back to the TRIPS, see, as I said, the way I say it, it was basically the demand from the developed countries. But it was also said that developing countries will benefit. And the two benefits that was cited, one was that as multinationals feel that the intellectual property assets are secure, they will invest more. We require more investments, we require more production, and therefore developing countries will benefit. Another is this, not only multinationals, local companies, Indian companies. See, in the world today, multinationals or the developed countries naturally invest money for developing which drugs which are relevant for their population. But there are certain diseases which are primarily relevant for poor countries, which are known as neglected diseases, where the multinationals and the developed countries do not spend any money, and therefore you do not have significant medicines there. In fact, there are many neglected diseases where you do not have too many significant drugs. And the idea was therefore that multinationals in any case will not do that, and you require incentive. Therefore, Indian companies will have the incentive to put money there so that these drugs are developed. So these are the two benefits claimed. And let us see what happened. We discussed both the MNCs and the Indian companies. And if you consider MNCs, I will classify or discuss under these heads. First, consider prices. You see, as I told you earlier, Indian prices were very competitive. But now see what is happening. For the last few years, these are some of the anti-cancer drugs, very critical drugs, this anti-neoplasm, then blood-related. A single injection by NUPI Aventis costs you rupees 3,30,000. That is about $1,800. You have so many drugs. A single injection costs $1,800, $1,500, $1,000, $750. And this is one injection. If you consider the treatment where you require several doses, it is actually unaffordable even for the really rich. As you know, in India, there are many rich people also. Even for them, it is difficult. So therefore, I told you what was there in 1960s, high prices internationally, then later low prices. Again, these prices are going up. These are, I have a just list of the top 20 or so. You can easily see all these are, monopoly prices, no other competition, multinationals, and and very, very vital, like anti-cancer, hormone, then pain, and so on, arthritis, which unless you have it, you cannot even walk.
This is present prices?
2012.
How many rupees to the dollar? To the US dollar?
60.
60.
Actually, 58 right now, but I have calculated 60. So if you see, so this will be around 1,800. Okay, so
that's perhaps not the best way to win. You could, if you take the first one, that's of a top university professor in India, it's twice their monthly salary, one injection.
3 lakh.
It's more than twice their monthly salary.
3 lakh.
One injection.
3 lakhs. So, I think Sudip is right. That's a good way of comparing.
Yeah.
So, typically, the Indian professor would be earning 1,50,000 in Indian rupees. So, one injection is twice my salary. Thank you for that comparison.
And that's the top 5% of the population in terms.
But these are more slim medicines for syndromes that occur a few thousand times per year in India? Or is it broad syndromes like hundreds of thousands of patients in India per year?
Yeah, actually, these are for cancer. Yeah. And cancer is now a very major threat in India.
Growing.
It's growing at a very rapid rate.
But still slim, right?
Compared to the total population, slim. But in terms of numbers, it is huge.
And growing.
Growing and growing. And you are right. And more important is, and the forecast is, prediction is, soon India will be a country where you will have significant number of, even relatively. Okay. Second is, again, idea that, if they feel their assets are secure, they will invest more. Okay. And I find very important. What has happened is that this plant and machinery investments, productive investment at constant prices, compared to 1994, actually has gone down after trips. It has not gone up. And here a little bit of history. Normally, typically we think that if you want to attract multinationals, what you should do is to invite them and have no restrictions. But if you see the history of foreign direct investment, that is not the way it works. Typically, when we give freedom, they may not come. It is only when you have restrictions and you can convince there is a marriage of interest, it will work. And let me give the example here. Before 1972, as I already told you, actually multinationals were invited. Please come. I have seen documents, our ministers inviting multinationals. They did not come. Why? Very simple. Because, their market was small. They did not take the trouble of setting up plants here. Any case, prices are high. They did not care much about the Indian market. They could have reduced prices, but obviously did not want to reduce prices significantly because that will affect the main market. So they did not come. When did they come? Actually, they started coming after 1970s. Because of what? Because of government insisted. Government started saying that, look, unless you start producing from the basic stages, in pharma there are two types of products or two stages. One is producing the chemicals, the bulk drugs, APIs, and then converting or processing these chemicals into finished dosage forms like tablets, injections. What multinationals were doing, they were only keen on the more profitable formulations. They were not keen on developing it. Indian government said no. If you want to produce, manufacture, market, you will also have to do basic manufacturing. And therefore, after the policy restrictions started, they found the market large. Some of them, of course, did not come, like Bristol Myers, did not come. But many, like Pfizer, Glaxo, etc., they were there and they expanded. Okay? And again, very interestingly, after the liberalization started in early 1990s, all over the world, including India, and as the restrictions on multinationals were withdrawn, what are the multinationals doing? Again, trying to withdraw. And that is the proof of that.
But is there any kind of major event around 2000 which creates the fall?
Yeah, that reason is this, that though the liberalization started in early 1990s, for pharma it started a bit late. So the impact came a bit later. Okay? And therefore you find what? That they have gone down. So therefore the first claim that they will invest more. And by the way, for most of the drugs, we don't require multinationals. But as you know, lately, most of the new drugs are in the biotechnology area, not in the traditional chemical area. So India are good at chemical, but India is not yet good at biotechnology. And therefore, if they had really set up plants, biotechnology plants, and started manufacturing, that actually would have been good for the country, for the Indian, because technology would have been there, diffusion would have been there, and we could have developed. So there was actually scope for doing that, but that is not what is actually happening. In fact, what they're doing, like what they did in 50s, 60s, they're actually importing. In India, where we very often, highlight this red one, that is the export. what we often do not realize is imports are also going up significantly. And what are these imports? These are basically imports of high-priced patented products, which multinationals, the examples I gave you, they are not manufacturing in the country. They're importing. And in fact, the most important country from where India is importing is actually Switzerland, which is a very high-priced nation. So it is not that you're importing because it is cheaper. You're importing because it is patented, high price, and there's no competition.
But if you go back, the export surplus is increasing.
Actually, it is narrowing down.
It is. I think it's becoming larger and larger. The
In
difference between exports and imports.
In absolute, but as a percentage.
Okay.
The rate of rate of growth, if you calculate, rate of growth of imports is more than the rate of growth of exports.
I see. Okay.
So you're right. In absolute terms, it is going up, but as a percentage, But more important point is, I just wanted to highlight not this red, but this blue. That unlike in the 1970s, 80s, when practically we did not import because we were self-sufficient, after early 2000. We are actually, after we in fact implemented product patent protection, it has significantly gone up.
But this huge rate of exports has earned India the title of the pharmacy of the poor world.
Absolutely.
Right? You should be proud.
I'm proud.
No need to make a secret of it. We have a huge export surplus of medicines.
Yeah.
Being the pharmacy of the poor world.
But you see, that's the point. What I wanted to convey is this. You see, you knew that India is the pharmacy of the world, right? You are aware of that, even before I told you. But you are not, are you aware of this?
Well, that's new, yeah?
Yes, cool. My highlight is, by telling the positive, also telling you the negative.
Yes, cool.
And as an Indian economist, I want even more better. So I will not only highlight the positive, I will highlight the weakness and what can be done.
Cool.
So in case I have given the impression that I am not proud of that, it's wrong. I'm really, really proud. This is the import of finished goods, and then the R&D. See, what is the important logic? That if there is product patents, then there will be more R&D. But what we often mix is this in the context of multinationals. Where are you doing the R&D? It is a well-known fact that much of the R&D by the multinationals are done in developed countries, not in developing countries. And therefore, whether or not you have product patents in India or other countries, it really does not matter. And I'm just, which is well known, I'm giving you some statistics on that. See, India is what? India is only 1% or less of the global sales of the major multinationals. So Indian market is nothing. Whether market grows up or down, the profits from the Indian operations, nothing so far as the total funding is concerned. Therefore, logically speaking, whether you have product patents here or not, whether profits are less or not, it does not matter. I'm saying this because though it is well known, you may be aware of the Novartis case. So there is an anti-cancer, anti-breast cancer drug called imatinib mesylate, and just about a year back, the Supreme Court judgment has come after 10 years of legal war that Novartis is not eligible to get that product patent. And after that Supreme Court judgment, the reaction of Novartis in India and elsewhere was this: that look, it is bad for innovation. It is a step which India shouldn't have taken. My question is very simple. Innovation where? Innovation in India? Innovation in the West? If it is innovation in the West, it is unlikely that Supreme Court judgment actually will have any effect because Indian market is so small. And if it is innovation in India, see what Novartis is doing. They hardly invest. And whatever little they invest, it is going down. And not only Novartis, that is trigger. In any case, multinationals did not invest much in R&D. But after TRIPS, it has gone down. So therefore, the simple point I'm trying to tell you is this, that it is not that after TRIPS, multinationals are investing more in R&D in countries like India. And therefore, the argument that you should have product patents to stimulate that argument is not valid. What is valid is, and what is obviously important, whether the multinational investment worldwide is going down or not. And there the point is, in any case, independent of TRIPS, you had product patents in Norway, in Europe, other countries, Europe, in US, in Japan. That did not change. And that is from where the market main profits will come. And therefore it is unlikely that that will go down. In fact, there is no evidence that because of Novartis judgment, any negative impact has been there in R&D. Yeah, another is very interestingly, typically what do we say, that there is a link between foreign direct investment and IPR. That if the IPR protection is good, if product patent protection is there, then there will be more FDI coming. Very interesting. India, what happened before 1972, when we have product patent, there was no multinationals doing any R&D in India. What happened? Very significant, and India was one of the few countries with that. After India abolished product patents, after the restrictions started, two multinationals, those days known as Ciba-Geigy, now part of Novartis, and Hext, now part of Aventis, they actually set up separate, very sophisticated R&D for developing new drugs. When India did not have product patents, and when India actually started having restrictions on multinationals. Why they did, of course, one can discuss, but obviously they felt that it makes sense. But again, after 1991, after TRIPS, what do you find? They actually closed them down. In fact, this really sophisticated R&D infrastructure they had, Ciba-Geigy and Hext, they actually have sold to Indian companies. So again, empirically, what do I see? I see product patents before 1972, no R&D. Product patent abolition, yes, R&D. Again, abolition of introduction of product patents, again, no R&D. And the conclusion that I derive is that, look, as such, the IPR regime has nothing to do with FDI or FDI in R&D. What is important are other factors. Last point regarding multinationals I want to tell you is this. Yeah, as I told you, I will be putting my points very directly, and I can see from your smile that you don't agree with everything. But
no, but it's very alarming that these factories that you were mentioning, they did patent in the USA. They, as you showed us, they did patent in the USA.
Yeah,
that's how we know they have genuine innovations, because they did get a patent in the US.
Yeah, but that gone down after. So that's the point.
Yeah, but the point is that if they couldn't have gotten the patent anywhere, you wouldn't have even known whether their innovation is genuine.
Absolutely, and therefore my point is, what we're discussing, whether giving product patent in India makes a difference.
In India?
Yes, my focus is on India. You see, I'm not discussing whether abolition of product patents in US will make a difference. I personally think that will make a huge difference. So that is, and therefore my argument is not whether there should be product patent in the world or not. Go back to my first slide. Developed countries, yes, it's controversial. There are many economists, including in developed countries, who will argue that there's a need for the world order to change, and you should have incentive for a different type, not monopoly patent. But my focus is not on developed countries. My focus is on developing countries, particularly India. And there again, since you mentioned, see what the foreign firms did. Before 1995 TRIPS, they actually had more patenting in USA because of more R&D than after. That is what I'm telling you. And again, like before TRIPS, Ciba-Geigy had 42 patents. During which period? When India did not have product patent protection.
Could you go back to the other slide? Because there you can see that Indian companies now are patenting much more.
I'll come to that.
Okay.
That is the second part of my lecture,
okay,
where I come to Indian companies. So this first part is foreign companies. And my argument here is, that foreign firms, when India did not have product patent protection, did R&D, set up R&D labs for new drugs, increased patenting. But after it was abolished, they have stopped it. And in fact, after TRIPS, those who are doing are not multinationals. Only few by Hext and AstraZeneca. Basically, Teva is an Israeli company, basically generic company. They are doing it. And Fresenius, of course, is a multinational, but much smaller multinationals. So the point that I'm trying to tell you is this, that even patenting, and that is a very good indicator of innovation, that actually has gone down after product patent protection was introduced in India. Okay, last point is, I think I can skip that. It is more details, but could be something important for those who work on patents. See, I told you the rationale for patents, and what is that? That it will stimulate R&D. Another very important thing is that you expect them to disclose the innovation and to work it. Okay? because logic being, if you do not have product patent, then people will not be very secretive. They will not want to divulge the details. And if details are not divulged, others don't know, and therefore add-on innovation cannot take place. So to promote, stimulate innovation, what you have to do, you will have to give them monopoly so that disclose, they also work it, and others also benefit. And what is very important for trying to find out the impact of product patent, what they are doing. And again, I find it so surprising. Out of the 1,100 product patents granted in India after 2005, only 13% is worked. In other words, 87% they have just got the patent and they are not doing anything with that. And if you see the reason, you will find the reason would be what? They often do not care to give the reason, though legally they are supposed to give. They will say under reason, I saw that forms in fact, none. They will say nothing in particular. So these are all taking it very casually, and India of course can take steps, but as of now, India has not done that. So the point that I'm trying to tell you is that even going by another fundamental expectation of patent protection, that you should work and help the country to develop, that is actually not taking place. And in fact, legally, India is entitled to revoke the patent because you are not doing it. Please.
What do these patents include? What is the protected patents? Patents that are taken out so that competitors cannot use
these are all medicine product patents.
Yes, but are they applied for to stop competitors?
Yes.
You can have a not operative patent in order not to develop anything, but to stop competitors from developing the same.
Yes. In other words,
would that be?
Yes. So all these 970 products, okay, since they have the patents, any other company, Indian company, even if they want to do it, they will not be permitted.
Yes.
And they themselves are not doing it. But that's what I'm saying.
But here's something very important about the TRIPS agreement. It is actually in the TRIPS agreement that the parties to the agreement cannot demand local working of the patents in order to let the patent holder have the patent. And this is, of course, a matter of huge political discussion, but it's in the TRIPS. The conditions for having a patent or not giving a forced license in the TRIPS are pretty clear. You cannot ask for local working. If the patent holder exports to that country in sufficient quantities, you have no grounds for forced license.
Absolutely right.
That's in the TRIPS agreement. So the question is a little bit irrelevant, because I think what you're thinking about here is not worked, but locally worked. Worked in India.
Yeah.
That's right. So the wording should be patents worked in India.
Yeah.
In India, right? That's what you're thinking about.
Yeah,
exactly. That's what I'm. That's
Actually,
what I'm.
my basically being India-centric. When I say worked, it means worked in India.
Well, but India is huge. Yeah.
Not only huge, but it's an international seminar. So therefore, I should be more careful in future.
Work
in
any
India.
international
seminar, I will write patents worked in India.
Because the percentages you're showing and the numbers, they must mean that
Absolutely.
It's in India. Yeah.
But you raise a more important point. You are absolutely right. If I go to the letter of the TRIPS, it says that you need not actually produce that patented in the country.
The so-called the issue of local work.
Absolutely. And you are again right, that is highly controversial. But you are obviously aware of the Brazil, USA. And what is important is India deliberately in the act, is they consider that you should be working it here. In fact, the only one compulsory licensing granted in India, it was given because the company buyer did not work in India.
You're talking about the Nexava case.
Yes.
You will certainly come to that.
Yes, I'll come to
the
that.
Nexava case.
Yes. Okay. So now, point is, therefore, if you say that what India is doing is not strictly as per TRIPS, I will agree with you. But it's also true that as of now, nobody, Europe, Japan, USA has raised this point. More important, very frankly, let me be direct and blunt with you. I'm not bothered about what they're in TRIPS. TRIPS, according to me, is totally unfair. So what I'm going to is the rationale. When you give, so I as an economist, just a minute, I as an economist will tell you that, look, obviously, TRIPS was done by whom? The developed countries. And you obviously, you have the power, you can impose it. But I as an economist will raise the logic. The logic of patents is what? That you actually have to work. So you are absolutely right about the TRIPS agreement. But my point would be I will go to more basic. I will say, if I'm giving you this, I want some benefit. And what is the benefit? Benefit is technology. So therefore, if you are not working it here, I'm not benefiting. And therefore, why on earth should I agree to that? If you have the power, do that. But don't stop me for raising it. That is the point.
Yeah, that's no problem. You're thinking more about the politics than the letter of the TRIPS.
Yes. No, I'm not. I'm not politics. I'm saying economics. I'm going to the fundamental logic of patents.
Yeah.
I'm saying you give patents for technology development. And I, as an economist, will raise this question: that if you are not developing technology, then you have the right to raise whether TRIPS should be changed. Of course, my voice doesn't matter, but I got an opportunity, so expressing it.
Right. But in this case, economics is policy.
Huh? Yes.
Policy is economics, and economics is policy.
Yeah, absolutely.
In French, the meaning of the word economics is économie politique.
Yes.
Political economy.
In India, we come from that subgroup, both Sudip and myself. We believe in actual political economy, and we do not do much of pure so-called pure quote-unquote neoclassical economy. But I think, thank you. It's a very important point that you mentioned, which otherwise I wouldn't have mentioned. Okay, so now let me go to. So these are some patent cases, details I can go later. So this is the summary that, reintroduction of product patents really has an impact. But in my view, impact is not positive but negative. Prices are already very high. We are seeing imports rather than manufacturing, hardly any R&D, and we have aggressive litigation, which I can speak much more later. And this idea that, stricter IPR regime will lead to more FDI is not relevant for the reasons I've already cited. So now let me come to India. On 5 minutes or so?
Yeah.
Sorry, but I think I can. I can now go to the essence of the Indian. See, earlier, before 1995 or 2005, there was no patented market in India. So anything developed abroad could be manufactured here. But now you have this distinction between non-patented, patent expired, and patented. So therefore now the options are what? Earlier this patented also you can manufacture, now you cannot manufacture. So what you can do? You can either directly try to develop new drug R&D, or you can collaborate with multinationals, or the government give you compulsory licensing. These are three options. This, we can discuss later, is not really happening. This is happening in a large scale. Many Indian companies are actually now collaborating with MNCs, which was not there earlier. In fact, many companies have been, purchased by, acquired by the multinationals. But what is very interesting is this, that though these R&D for new drugs, in response to the very important point that you raised, normally would be taken up by more matured firms. Because R&D for new drugs is a very, very, resource intensive, skill intensive. You require different types of people, started from, life sciences, chemistry, etc. And India did not have that. But what is very important about India is, or this is also very interesting, slide. Typically, when you start at the bottom, where there are hardly any entry barriers. Not much barriers, anybody can enter. But since anybody can enter, prices are low, profits are low. And if you really want to earn profits, the extreme is new chemical entity R&D. It is highly risky, but once you succeed, you get huge returns because there is monopoly. And in between, there are so many things. What surprised many people is, though India would have been here, India after TRIPS, also some of them started doing new drug R&D. That is something very new, which did not happen in many other countries. And in fact, let me skip this here. And therefore, what we find that major Indian companies, their R&D, which was not significant, at the time TRIPS, went up significantly. But after that, there was a setback. I'll come to that later. Now, coming to your point, see, if you consider the patenting, since time is short, if you see patenting, before the TRIPS, Indian companies hardly had any patenting. But after TRIPS, you have a significant, and I have this graph, practically nothing, and how it has gone up. So there were two clear statistics that we have. After TRIPS, Indian companies are more R&D intensive, and they are also innovating more, and they are getting more patents. The important point, what is the implication? Some people have been conclude from here that is a positive effect of TRIPS. I disagree. I think that is not a positive effect of TRIPS. I think in any case they would have done that. See, what are the Indian companies doing? Their basic motivation is to get the US market and the European market. What is US market? About 50% of the world market, even more now. And USA had product patents before TRIPS, after TRIPS. So my point is, even if you did not have product patents, the motivation of the Indian companies to do R&D, get it patented, would have been done in any case. And if I say, so why it is 1995, I would say that is the time when India became mature. When did India start? After 1972. So, and it was only around 1980s that they consolidated manufacturing. So it was only around 1990s that they could, diversify to R&D, and that coincided with the TRIPS. I'll come to your question, but let me first complete my argument. In fact, what I think has happened, let me come to the last slide since time is not there. Yeah. So the way I see it is this, that when India started, what was the strategy of India? Very interesting. India did not have money, did not have all the skills. So what did Indian companies do? They started developing molecules and then out-licensing it to multinationals. Multinationals also, because of the problems of R&D, they were also keen to, in-license very attractive molecules. And therefore, what happened? Ranbaxy and Dr. Reddy's, who started doing R&D, and there was a huge news item those days that they have developed and they have, out-licensed to Novo Nordisk, to AstraZeneca and things like that, and got some money. Very interesting, and that is what I gathered from one of the research director. See, what is the motivation of Indian companies doing this? Basically, since they cannot do the entire thing, to do a part and then give it to multinationals, so they will develop, and if it succeeds, they will get royalty. So it's a good business model. What Indian companies found out later, in many cases, multinationals are in-licensing not to further develop, but to kill the competition. Maybe that drug, if successful, would compete with one of the major products. So therefore, what is the smarter thing to do? Buy it out. And therefore, this collaboration with multinationals did not work the way it wanted. In fact, Ranbaxy, if you take, they invested huge amounts of money. They initially out-licensed, but then only for few drugs. And they got no return. And therefore, the investments on R&D, there was practically no return. In fact, the story is, Ranbaxy did not want to sell the entire company to the Japanese company. They only wanted to sell the R&D part. But then Japanese company gave a very attractive offer and they sold it out. But these are, not verified things. But the important point is, that our Indian companies who started doing R&D initially got some payments because they out-licensed, but that did not, ultimately go on. And therefore, the investments were not there. And that is what I also proved by giving examples. That they have not really gained much. The PPT would be there. I don't have time, but it is there. And in fact, coming to this last point, that assume that the TRIPS were not there. Do you think Indian companies wouldn't have done that? Surely they wouldn't have done that, because now they have this much maturity to do at least a part and then subcontract. And in any case, it doesn't matter whether you have product patents in India or not. And in fact, the fact that we have product patents in India, it has made it worse, because if India did not have product patents, then profits would have been higher, because they could also manufacture those drugs, and therefore they would have been in a better position to invest more on R&D. So rather than TRIPS leading to more R&D, I would argue that if you did not have TRIPS, the positive that we see would have been there, and in fact the negative wouldn't have been there.
If you go back to the graph you had this, you said that the TRIPS agreement was implemented in 2005, wasn't it?
1995, but
it was implemented in 2005, wasn't it?
Yes. No, it's actually this is slightly complex.
Okay.
Because what we had in India is a two-phase.
Okay.
We started giving product patents after 2005, but anybody could actually apply for product patents after 1995.
Okay.
Those would be held in a mailbox.
Okay.
And the patent would be granted only after 2005.
Because my point was that the large increase started long before the TRIPS agreement would have been implemented, but I thought it was implemented in 2005.
Yeah. So that's the point,
Okay.
And it's very interesting. But you see, though you would be actually giving the product patents after 2005, if you have got it, and if Indian firm has started it, then the multinational can take step against that. So that is a funny part of that. Okay. In fact, you're right, that is one point. But the way I argue is this, that even if the TRIPS were not there, my hypothesis, maybe not exactly like that, it is possible TRIPS have stimulated, accelerated this tendency. But even if the TRIPS were not there, if I have the opportunity to actually product patent it in USA, and if I can find, say, GlaxoSmithKline to take it, I would have done that. Okay.
You have tried to move up the value chain.
Yes.
After the experience gained by IDPM.
Yes.
When the people got more and more qualified,
Absolutely.
production technology, quality-wise, etc.
Yes. In fact, I would assume if you come to this slide, this one, this is what I expect. Gradually India will go up, and independent of TRIPS, since any case Europe, Japan, your USA has product patent protection, you naturally want to do what? As we have more experience, not only manufacturing, you can do more R&D. You will want to do that. And for independent of TRIPS, that is what I would have expected. Okay, but I grant the point that TRIPS may have accelerated this tendency because the domestic opportunities got it. Yeah, so I think, yeah. So that is where I will stop. Trying to say that if you take what multinationals and Indians, any case, that would have been there. But anyway, let me not summarize.
Well, thank you, Sudip, for a very engaging lecture. We have Professor Sudip is going to be a commentator on this. I don't know, some of the issues that you may want to raise may have come up already, since there was quite a bit of discussion along the way. But I'm sure you have some additional points you want to make as well. So please. Per Botov, by the way, is a former researcher here at NUPI. He is now here as an adjunct researcher in 20% position, and he has worked on WTO and the TRIPS agreements and patent issues for many years himself.
Okay, you can see this. First, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. The TRIPS agreement. Sorry, should I stand there? Okay. The TRIPS agreement has been very controversial, as you have outlined, and many of those arguments that you have given were given already when the TRIPS agreement was formalized, and they were very heavy academic arguments against the TRIPS agreement. One of them is presented in Econometrica from 1993, which is, I think, the most prestigious economics journal at all, by a researcher called Heltman, who in fact warned very heavily against the effects of the TRIPS agreement, saying that it would imply a massive distribution of income from poor countries to rich countries. And these arguments were clear before the TRIPS agreement was signed. Just now to take a very short introduction to the economics of this. This is a market for a good with a falling demand curve, and here, for simplicity, a constant marginal cost curve. So in absence of any monopoly situation, the produced quantity will be here. Prices will reflect marginal costs, and that will be to great advantage for the consumers, because what we denote as the consumer surplus is the difference between what consumers are ready to pay and what they actually pay. So in this market, this will be the consumer surplus. Then comes the TRIPS agreement, which means that the producers now are monopolists. And this means that the producers take into account that when they reduce the price, that when they increase sold quantity, they have to reduce the price, so that their extra revenues from selling one additional good is lower than the demand curve, because they have to reduce the price on all the goods sold. So they face a marginal revenue curve, which is always below the demand curve. And the monopolist will set the produced quantities so that the price, so that the marginal revenues are equal to the marginal costs. So a monopolist will produce this quantity in order to realize this price, in order to realize these profits. So comparing this graph with the previous graph means that consumer surplus is reduced by this amount and by this amount. So that is the massive income distribution consequence of monopolies, that a large part of the consumer surplus now goes to the monopolist. Then in addition comes the efficiency loss from patents, because producers will reduce the sold quantity from this quantity to this quantity, meaning that these consumers go out of the market. And another very politically engaged researcher called this monopolist death row, because these are consumers who will not be able to consume the goods due to the higher prices. And in pharmaceutical, this is of course illustrated very dramatically, but it applies so for all types of goods. So these are the effects of patents and introducing patents in more countries. And this also illustrates why patents is a very inefficient way to finance R&D. Of course, the whole idea here is that in absence of patents, this market would not have existed, because then there will be no one who wanted to invest in this product in order to realize these profits. So that in absence of patents, this might not have been an existing market at all. The inefficient way to finance R&D is that if we could have financed R&D in any other way, for instance by taxes, by the government, by subsidies or whatever, then the whole area could have been realized as consumer surplus, and we could have avoided this efficiency loss. And before the TRIPS, you have argued that for India, the situation was pretty much like that. And now it is like this. Massive income distribution from Indian consumers to the multinationals, and an efficiency loss that it might be rather large.
So what would happen if you didn't have the unbeatable efficiency of the large multinational companies in producing the products? You can show that on your curve. For example, pushing up the marginal cost to twice or three times, because
yes,
anybody else is less efficient in producing. Like the best production facilities in India are very efficient already. They are closing in on the best multinational companies, cheap but skilled labor, but it has taken 20 years or 30 years before they got there.
Yeah.
And still the best multinationals have these super robotized factories, which means that their marginal cost is lower than anyone else's. They have the most efficient factories.
I agree on that.
Yeah.
That is a valid point.
That's a pretty interesting point.
So. But it doesn't change the main argument.
No, it only pushes the curve in the theoretical alternative case.
Maybe, but that is only for the hypothetical situation where the multinationals are much more efficient in their marginal costs than local producers, and it might not always be like that.
No, but just a minute. But is there evidence, that for standard drugs, multinationals are manufacturing cost is lower? Do you have evidence for that? Because I would have assumed, in really sophisticated vaccines and biotechnology, you see, nobody is doubting the technological prowess of multinationals. So the issue is, what the Indians or other can do, whether they can do it cheaper.
In next of our case, I heard that the price slash that gave the compulsory license was 97%.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
You cut the price by 97%. And it still gives a profit to the production factory
Yes.
in India
Absolutely.
because they have such cheap labor, but they promised they would have the quality standards required by the Indian hygiene and medical authorities.
Yeah.
They would fulfill all the quality standards needed. For at least for the Indian market. I don't know whether they're the same quality and hygiene standards as for the European or US, Brazilian market.
Yes, I'll come to that after we are finished.
But the consumer argument is very general because any industry with a sunk cost would have to have prices above marginal cost.
Sure.
So from the same argument, the government should intervene and build the factories and whatever.
But then nowadays bring some really interesting spice into this. For new antibiotics, where the world, even the developed world, is hungering for new antibiotics to combat multi-resistant Staphylococcus aureus and multi-resistant tuberculosis, the big killers that are coming back. Even with product patent facilities or availability in place in the West, the multinational medical companies, some of them are not finding it interesting to invest heavily into new antibiotics because the treatment is only 14 days, not the rest of your life. So what is much more interesting to them is to invest into drugs that you have to take year after year after year in order to support your life, not a treatment of 14 days that cures you.
That is,
So you're finding it extremely difficult, even with product patent protection in the West, to get the multinational companies to invest heavily enough into new antibiotics.
which is a very good reason why patents do not ensure that the correct or best or socially optimal innovations are made. Because innovations are made out of profit motives rather than out of social needs.
The conclusions we can discuss until eternity.
Sure.
But the evidence, right, that the investment into new antibiotics, high-tech antibiotics, it doesn't produce these newly made and needed antibiotics. The evidence is there.
Sure.
But what the political conclusions may be, we can discuss a lot.
I agree. Yes. But
if
you made
the
a point
problem is
that
you have the money, but not the numbers. In countries like India have the numbers, but not the money to buy these medicines. So it doesn't work out either way.
No, but the West, all the governments in the West would really like to see new antibiotics in order to fight tuberculosis
if the
and
14-day
staphylococcus.
treatment, but the number of buyers was large, would still be a viable proposition.
As soon as the world is the
If
market,
the number, yeah.
as soon as the middle class in India is 500 million and in China 500 million, then the market would be large.
I think we have to allow him to.
I'll just finish and then we can maybe have and this is my last slide, so I was asked to give a short comment. So the problems with the TRIPS agreement has been that this is a major income distribution from the south to the north, which I think you have you have strengthened those arguments. Furthermore, it prevents countries to tailor-make their intellectual property rights regimes for their specific needs. And I think that we have also made a valid point that this is a problem. But there has also been counter-arguments against this. And one very good economist making these counter-arguments is Paul Sagerson, who has recently published a paper where he argues that many of all the arguments against TRIPS are not valid. And in particular, he says that the TRIPS agreement has stimulated growth in R&D, which benefits the North and the South alike, because more innovations are coming. He also says that the TRIPS agreement has stimulated FDI and therefore also contributed to growth in developing countries. I think you have made good counter-arguments against that point of view. And he claims that the TRIPS agreement has improved the incentives for doing R&D directed towards the needs in developing countries. And I think that your presentation was also a counter-argument against that argument in favor of the TRIPS agreement. So I think, as I said, I think your presentation was highly interesting, very interesting. You have, my last point is this.
Please.
Your case is the pharmaceutical industry. And in the pharmaceutical industry, these effects are very dramatic because they are about life and death. And the HIV epidemics has been, in particular, very illustrating for many of these effects. In some ways, I think it is a pity that the pharmaceutical industry is always the case for this, because all these effects applies to all industries, to small and large innovations in every type of industry. So all these arguments are valid also for other industries than the pharmaceutical industry. That was one of my comments, but again, I think your presentation was very interesting.
Sorry, what was the name of the researcher you mentioned?
Paul Segerström.
Segerström?
Yes.
Segerström. Norwegian or Swedish? Or?
Swedish.
Swedish.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Per Bortolf. This was a very interesting and stimulating exchange, and for me, who's not an economist, I think I learned quite a bit from it.
Could we get the set of slides from Mr. Chaudhuri?
Yes,
Would be very interesting.
absolutely.
Even the slides you didn't show so exactly about the individual products.
We actually have about 15 minutes left, so if there are any further questions, either to Sudip or to Per Bortolf, we can have some time for that. But first, maybe Sudip, you want to respond to Per Bortolf's comments?
No, I think, I in agreement. Only thing is, the last slide. The first is in the arguments,
Yes.
counter arguments,
Yes.
and there would be counter arguments.
From you. Yes. But I didn't hear your presentation.
Yes, please. Just to add some sharpness to the questions yet unanswered after the comments and counter comments at the 2012 senior officials course in TRIPS and WIPO IPR offered by the combined efforts of the WIPO and WTO Secretariat in Geneva. I was there, and Mrs. Wattal from India
Yes, you
was the leading teacher for the WTO Secretariat. You should be proud. And she was also on the Indian negotiation delegations for the TRIPS before 1995. So she could tell out of the internal, the basis of her internal knowledge, of course not disclosing secrets, but she could tell the negotiation positions of the Indian delegation before 1995. And then she told us that what is the question, even when she works at the WTO Secretariat now, officially she represents the TRIPS. It's a part of the WTO agreement, that's of course. But what she was saying that in her courses, I can produce for you, I can share with you the course material. It's on a CD-ROM, can be shared. It's also on paper. Is that the question is, if you presuppose that an effective and secured patent regime, after a while, when the big companies start believing in it, they would start FDI where there is a worthwhile market, right? But in order to reap the fruits or the benefits of the FDI in local investment, already the local employees need to have a certain skill level, and perhaps you need factories, local factories, owned by locals, to reap the full benefit of this FDI. Meaning that to extract the technological progress out of the FDI, you would need to have personnel that is well trained enough so that they can work at those factories erected by FDI, and then bring back that knowledge to local factories. So that you need to have a certain level of development in order to reap the benefits of the FDI. And so the really hard question, which we at the Department of Innovation at the Ministry of Trade and Industry are working on, what are the conditions to reap the full benefits, innovation-wise, of this opening of the markets of the WTO? Under which conditions does an effective worldwide patent regime lead to this level of FDI and transportation or knowledge transfer from the FDI holders to the local forces? And that is very, very hard to answer. The conditions under which this flow of innovation and technological knowledge and skills is effective and outweighs the theoretical disadvantages of having to grapple with what is in theory market monopoly. So it's very hard to say, or that was at least the point of discussion, and they didn't have an answer there. Of course, it's some of the. There are not very many papers to be found. I haven't found many new papers about this, so it's a good challenge for you to investigate further. Under which conditions is the flow of knowledge transfer from the FDI holders to the locals strong enough to defend the system?
Yeah. You see, it's a question of what is the question you are asking. See, you are asking a question. Your starting point is FDI, and under what conditions FDI can be better, and can have a positive effect, right? I, coming from a developing country, will not ask that question. I will ask the question: we want to develop, and then while developing, among many other things, we'll also want to take advantage of FDI.
Because you need investment capital.
Yes, right. Yes, and therefore, and whether or not, or to what extent FDI, I think you can make no general statements about that. It's a question of you trying to develop. It's a trial and error. In fact, I think we need to take history very much more seriously.
Oh, yeah.
And that will give the answer also.
I'm not an economist. I'm a lawyer.
Yeah,
by training. So
yeah.
History is important, definitely. Yes. And in India, it's very important.
I think for all those arguments also, because if you see that, then you will find that there is no one way. So coming to your point, the question that I will ask is, I want to develop, and when I want to develop, see, in India, it's very interesting. That's why I went to history. What did India want to do in 1950s? They actually wanted to do what you are saying. They wanted to use FDI. But then what happened? They did not respond. So therefore the question is, what do you do at that time? Do you now again run after them, go to Europe and USA, please come, or do something else? I will say, beyond the point, don't do that. See what are the other options available. Those days we had option, now you may have different option. So therefore I will not start from FDI. I will start with what? Developing industries in the country. And then I will, depending on the case, I will use, depending on the case. So it will be a variety of what? Typically, if you the history, yes, FDI is one, but many industries not FDI. It would be our domestic R&D. If it's domestic R&D, it would not be private sector, it would be public sector. But now there's a problem. Yeah, the problem is this, in the West, there is a tremendous bias against public sector. If you mention public sector, there will be no, again, inefficiency, government, etc. But if you go to history, there is no way out. And if you take the history, in many countries, consider steel industry in Korea. How did it develop? Not by multinationals, by public sector. In China, so many industries actually public sector. So therefore, I am not biased. I am
in
not
Norway, the oil industry.
Yes.
Yes.
I will now that I have come to Norway. In future seminars, I will mention also Norway.
The oil industry of Norway in the 70s was developed by systematic government intervention.
Yes. So I think we should be coming out of these biases. Anti-public sector, pro FDI. It's a question of developing the competence, depending on the case. And I believe FDI has played a remarkable role in many industries. It's not a question of not using it. Even in pharma in India, they have played a role. But it's a question of, and that is our project also, the government of the country having a priority and trying to manage it so that you develop.
Yes, I have two questions. One to Bevotov, and that is just curious. I've seen from afar that there have been quite new developments in theory around patenting, like by David Levine and others, that indicate that it does, even for developed countries, they don't have this kind of innovation stimulating effects that one normally has assumed. So I was thinking, is it that kind of argument something that is taken seriously in wider?
Oh yeah, sure. Among economists, patents are highly controversial. I think.
I know. Yeah.
So at least among those who work actively, this was kind of a textbook presentation. But patents as a innovation stimulating tool is very controversial. But it is underlined that they will work differently in different industries, in different countries, in different settings, and the like. So, but I think that there is agreement that sometimes patents works to stimulate innovation, but not always.
And there's also agreement on one point, and that I think that point is pretty important. The way commercial innovation is conducted in this world, all around the world, even in China and India, US, Norway. Norway is a mixed economy, not a capitalist economy, a mixed economy. The way innovation is conducted, commercial innovation for profitable enterprise, must be rethought totally. Absolutely. If you take away patents. Patent is a precondition. Patentability is a precondition of how innovation works nowadays.
I disagree with you on that, because in many industries there are no patents.
The EU Observatory for IPR infringement has done the first really scientifically based analysis. Just last year it was out on the significance, the societal value of IPR protection in the EU. And then it shows that the companies holding IPRs, like brands, designs, copyrights, patents, they have higher wages, more profitability, more effectiveness, they attract more R&D, etc. And they have a more than proportional effect on value creation in the whole of the EU. Of course, this analysis, you can discuss endlessly the scientific value or the scientific basis of it, but it was done on the basis of the best scientific work available from the OECD, the different international think tanks, even doing an analysis beforehand by the RAND Foundation, and then they chose their method. And by that method, IPR comes out pretty high, pretty important. Of course, not only patents.
No, I have one question. I think the study is for developed countries, European Union, right?
It was for the EU.
Yeah. See, that's the point. What is true for developed countries, who already are developed and who has been with the IPR system for a long time, and in the implication of IPR for those countries, for those companies, I believe would be quite different from a developing country. So therefore, what you find from developed countries may not be true for developing countries.
But you will find that point discussed by people from Portugal, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece. I can continue.
I think
that have almost no patents in their name.
Yeah.
No, but it's they had a lot of more pharmaceutical industry before the product patenting was, so it's part of the pharmaceutical industry in Southern Europe was kind of declined because of the change in the system.
Well, we in Norway only introduced product patents for medicines in 1994.
Absolutely, that is the point.
And the Norwegian pharmaceutical industry is
absolutely, that is the point, which I could have quite. But it's not. My request would be, don't use Bulgaria or Portugal as a proxy for developing countries. Though the gap is much less, but the structurally they are quite different.
No.
So my request would be, European Union, if you can also, to come to a more general. And I am so glad that European Union now there is more concern about the prospects and the potential of developing country developing. And like in Africa, European Union is investing heavily in developing the local production in Africa. Okay, there I think what will help is to actually see it from the angle, not use developed countries as a proxy, but take the difference, the specific features of developing countries, and then find the role of IPR, which can be quite different.
And then you need to take the specificities of India.
India.
No countries like India.
We're running out of time. Per Botolf, one last comment or question?
And then we'll have to ask about when I commented, and that was the graph showing the very large increase in Indian patents in the United States. Couldn't it be that possibility to patent at home in India was a good introduction for these firms to also patent in the US? So that introducing patents in India stimulated them also to patent abroad.
It's a counterfactual, difficult to say no, but see the point. That even for all this today, for the major Indian companies, 80, 90%, 70% is exports.
Yes.
So they are no longer bothered about the Indian market. That is one negative feature, and therefore what
that's a negative feature.
Exactly.
90% exports.
Exactly.
In any branch of industry here in Norway where we export 90%, like the aquaculture fish, We pride ourselves of this fact.
No,
Hurrah!
In a small country.
No,
Yeah, it's a very small country.
No, I will tell you.
India has a
I will
huge
tell you-
internal market.
Not only that, you are saying that because that is not at the cost of development. But India, we did not discuss that. Our healthcare is in pretty bad shape. Jens was actually trying also, will be working on that area particularly, where while we have developed the pharma industry, access to medicine is very low. So in a system where access to medicine is very low, for you to export 90% of your medicines outside, I think socially it doesn't make sense. But and therefore, I would believe, obviously the Indian market may give extra stimulus. But even if you did not have product patents, since the motivation is the huge European and the American market, in any case they would have increased their patent. That is one thing one can say with certainty or certainty.
But do lots of these exports go to Brazil?
Yes.
Because we will really be keen on learning about South-South trade.
Absolutely.
India, Brazil.
Absolutely. But if you see,
And this is the future.
for most of the large companies, more is going to USA. USA is now the largest partner. Single largest country where we export is USA, not developing countries.
Okay, I think we close there, but we could continue maybe just informal discussion, but we could finish with the seminar right now.
Okay.
So thank you, Sudip, and thank you for interesting comments and questions and a good discussion here.
Thank you so much for inviting Mr. Chaudhuri.
Yeah.
Extremely interesting.